recycled materials, and they are all compostable, which is really helpful because that way when it's time to put your seeds in the garden, you can just put them right into the soil and you don't have to worry about taking them out of a plastic container and potentially exposing them to transplant shock. So the three recycled materials I have today are an egg carton, some newspaper, and some toilet paper rolls. So with your egg carton, that would definitely be the easiest way to start your seeds because you don't have to do any construction. You'll just put your seeds and your soil right in the little holes where the eggs once were. The only thing that I would say is the disadvantage about starting your seeds in an egg carton is that the holes are very tiny, so your seeds will not last very long in this container and they will have to be transplanted up. So you'll either have to have something that will be ready to go outside soon or transplant them into a bigger container before you can put them outside. So we're about maybe 8 weeks or so from our average last frost date, which is usually around the middle of June. So this is right around the time when you want to be starting some of your fruits and veggies for your summer garden. So everything that you need to know about how you want to plant your seeds, this is some watermelon seeds, is going to be on the back. And you'll notice that they usually have instructions both for when to sow outside as well as when to sow inside. So this is watermelon, and it does recommend starting inside if you are in a USDA zone 7 or colder, which we are, 4 to 6 weeks before average last frost. So it might be a little bit early for these watermelons. You'll also know that a lot of seed companies, when you completely take apart and go inside, the paper here also has more information about growing that kind of produce. So seed packets are your friend, and you want to make sure that you pay attention to all of the helpful information they have to offer. So to start your seeds in an egg carton, all you'll want to do is fill it up with soil. And I would recommend that you pre-wet your soil, because if you're working with dry soil, it can become what we call hydrophobic, and when you go to water it, the water doesn't really absorb and it goes all over, and you may end up displacing a lot of the seeds that you just planted. So I like to pre-wet my soil. So what I've done is put a bunch of soil in a plastic bucket, and then I put some water and mix it around so that my soil would already be nice and damp and I don't have to worry about displacing my seeds. So I will just fill up my container with some soil now. And the other thing that's nice about using egg cartons is that they are already made of recycled paper, so they break down really easily, and you'll notice quite quickly after you've started your seeds that the roots will already be growing through the paper, which is kind of fun to see. I was surprised by that the first time I started seeds in an egg carton, because I did not think that the roots would be able to make it through so easily. So I filled that up with soil, and I'm just going to kind of press down on it to make sure that everything's in place. The soil that I have is this G&B seed starter mix. I got this at Moana Nursery. If you guys want to order from Moana, they're doing a nice thing right now where you can just call in your order and then they'll bring it to your car when you get there, so you can really avoid any kind of interaction. So I think what I'll go ahead and plant in my egg cartons is some cilantro. I like to grow cilantro at home because I don't use a ton of cilantro, and it is frustrating buying it at the store and using just a little bit in a recipe, and then the rest ends up going to waste. So I like growing it, and then I can just take as much as I need. So with cilantro, on the back of the seed packet here, it says that it should be planted about 1/4 inch deep. So that's really not very deep at all. I'll just kind of set them down on the top of the soil and squish them in a little bit. And that should be plenty deep enough for them. And what is nice about this egg carton is that it almost fits perfectly into this planter box that I have. So when my seedlings start growing, I will be able to just plant it right directly into this planter box that I have. So this is my planter box, and you can see the egg carton is just a little bit longer than the planter box. So I'll just cut off the last 2 cups, and then it will fit perfectly in this box, and I can grow my cilantro in here. And then I like to just mist my seeds after I've planted them, because as I said, when you pour water on them, the soil can kind of go everywhere. And these should be good since I already pre-wetted the soil. So yeah, if you're planting, depending on what you're planting, you can either put the entire egg carton right into the ground, or if you have different types of seedlings in each cup and you want to separate them out, you can just go ahead and after they've started growing, cut them apart and put them wherever in your garden you would like to. You should definitely wait though to cut them apart, because if you cut them apart before putting soil in, you won't really have the structure to hold the soil in, and it will make a big mess. So the next method I want to show you guys is newspaper seed pots. And this is what I am personally starting my seedlings in this year. I liked the idea of the newspaper seed pots because they give me a little bit more room to grow than if I were to start them in an egg carton. And I think that because the paper is really kind of soft, I'm hoping that it will decompose very quickly in the soil and not create any kind of hindrance to my seedlings. So these I started a couple weeks ago, and hopefully you can see I've already got some germinating. So you'll want to make sure with all of these that you put them on some kind of surface to catch water, because obviously they're not waterproof and you don't want to make a big mess wherever you're putting your seedlings. I have these ones under a small grow light that I have, but if you do not have a grow light, then I would recommend a south-facing window for your seedlings. Just pay attention to your seed packs, because some seeds do like to be started completely in the darkness, so they might have some trouble germinating if you put them in a full light window. But for the most part, south-facing windows are ideal because they'll get the most light throughout the day for your seeds. So to make these cute little newspaper seed pots, what you will need is some kind of cylinder shaped item. So you can use a cup, but I would say that you want something that's a perfect cylinder because it makes it a little bit easier to shape. This is an old vitamin bottle, and it's about the size that I want my seed cups to be. So if you are not subscribed to a newspaper, you could also use the coupons and advertisements that you get weekly in the mail, or you could use a paper bag or any kind of recycled paper that you're not using anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this sheet of newspaper in half down the middle because it's a little bit long, and I don't want to wrap it around my cylinder too many times because that will be too thick and it'll be hard for the roots to grow through. So if it's helpful to you, you can take measurements beforehand of how much space you need to leave at the bottom and how much space you need to leave at the top. I don't think that that's really necessary, but it could be a helpful step. You're just going to want to make sure that you have about half left over at the bottom of what is the diameter of your cylinder. So my cylinder is about 2 inches, so I'm going to need to make sure I leave at least an inch on the bottom that I will fold under to make the bottom of my seed pot. So what I will do is I will line this up about an inch from the bottom of my newspaper here. And then I'm just going to roll it all the way along. So now I just have a tube rolled around my little vitamin bottle. And what you can do now is you're just going to push the inch that you left at the bottom down against the bottom of your tube to close the pot in. So push it down as tight as you can. It'll be a little loose, but you don't really have to worry about that. The structure will hold better once you get it filled with soil and watered in. So then you're only going to want maybe an inch or 2 on the top that you'll fold down. So my newspaper is way too long, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut some of this off of the top so that I'm not working with so much. Then I will pull the cylinder that I used to shape it out, and now what I'm going to do is fold down this top part to hold the pot together. So this is another part where you could make a line if you're not sure how far down you want to fold it. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but if you wanted your pots to be, you know, exactly 3 inches, then you could draw a line 3 inches up and say, okay, this is the line that I'm going to fold to. So you just fold that in until this pot is about the size that you want it to be. And you'll notice that they're a little bit unsteady at first. Like if I set this down, it falls over, but that's okay. That'll be corrected when you fill it with soil and you put your little seeds in there and get it wet. It will hold together a lot better. But if you're annoyed by it falling over, like I tend to get, I just put some little rocks to hold it up while I'm waiting to put the soil in. So then our last method, which I think is probably the easiest, well, the egg carton would be the easiest. This would be the second easiest. The newspaper is the hardest, but it's almost like kind of a meditative origami-like project. So you can get going if you're making a lot of seed pots. It's a nice kind of calming activity that you don't have to think too hard about. So the last one with the toilet paper tubes, my only concern with the toilet paper tubes is that the cardboard is a little thicker, so I do question a bit how much the roots will be able to grow through the cardboard if I were to plant it just straight into the ground. But I think if you were doing toilet paper tubes and you were concerned about that, it would be really easy to just cut them right off before you plant your seed in the ground. So to make your seed pots with a toilet paper tube, all you need to do is make 4 cuts along the bottom, probably in about an inch deep. So this is another thing that I'm just going to eyeball it, but if you wanted to take specific measurements to be more precise about it, you can do that too. So in the shape of a T, I am just going to make my 4 1-inch deep cuts. Oop, that one went a little too. So to close up the bottom and have the bottom of your pot, you're now just going to fold over all of those sides that you just cut. So in the end, it looks like this, and kind of like with the newspapers, it's not really holding together, but once you fill it with soil, it will stand up a lot better. So I have one that I've already done, and you can see now that it absorbed some water and is filled with soil, it's holding together just fine. So I will plant, I think I will do some butterfly weed in here. I tried planting these earlier this spring, and I think that I maybe tried to put them outside too soon because they were not too successful. But I love to plant things that are going to be good for the pollinators. So I'm going to go ahead and plant some butterfly weed seeds. So this one says, for earlier blooms, start indoors in flats about 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. When plants are 2 inches high, thin or transplant before they become crowded. So you can put more than one seed in your seed pot for just better chances that something will germinate, or if something happens to the first seedling, then you have another seedling still there. But I tend to just put one seed per hole because I work with kids and I'm constantly telling them 1 seed per hole. They really have a problem with that when it comes to carrot seeds because they're really tiny and they just throw a whole bunch in there. But I like to just do 1 seed in a pot because that saves you the trouble of having to thin them out later. So this one wants to be only 1/8 of an inch deep, so that's not very deep. So again, I'll just put it in the top, push it down, and throw a little bit of soil over it. And then give it a little mist. So the last thing that I will say, hopefully I've said everything I wanted to say, but something that is super important for anybody who is starting seeds indoors is that before you bring your seeds outside, it is super important that you harden them off. And what that means is that when you start your seeds inside, you are putting them in a very controlled climate. The temperature is never going to fluctuate more than probably 10-15 degrees at night tops. You are having a regulated amount of sunlight. You're not worried about wind when you're inside. So before your seeds are ready to be put outside, you have to make sure that you kind of ease them into it. And that's what gardeners call hardening off. So the way that you'll want to do that is to put your seeds out for 1 hour the first day, and then you will incrementally increase that amount of time. So you'll do 1 hour the first day, then the next day you can put them out for 2 hours, then the next day you can put them out for 3 hours. This is kind of a pain to do, but luckily we're all pretty much stuck at home right now, so hopefully we have some time to really check on our seedlings and be able to baby them as much as we can so that they are able to grow super happy and healthy. So that's what you'll want to do to harden them off. Make sure that you keep them away from little critters, because I know that quail love to eat young seedlings. I definitely have a problem with that in my garden. Something else you can do is, if you have like a little tub like this, inside or out, you could cover your seedlings, put it upside down, cover your seedlings, and create basically a mini hothouse for your seedlings. And that will help them retain humidity and a little bit more controlled climate. One more tip that I want to say about all of these, but particularly the newspaper pots, is that something that I noticed after I had started them is that they were starting to grow mold in the middle. So if you are doing one of these methods, because I think these recycled materials are a little more prone to molding quite quickly, what you'll want to do is either open your window and make sure you get some fresh airflow through, or put a fan on them. That will also help strengthen your seedlings so that when they do go outside eventually, they won't be just obliterated by our very heavy Nevada winds. But yeah, you will want to make sure that your seedlings are getting some air. And same goes if you put them in any kind of do-it-yourself hothouse, or even if you buy, I know at the garden centers you can get like little seed startings that have hothouses on them. You just want to make sure that you get your seedlings appropriate airflow. That will prevent the soil from molding and all of that as well. And then one more important thing is labeling your seedlings. When your seeds sprout, most seeds look pretty much the same when they first come up. So it's super important to label, because otherwise it will take quite a while before you really know what you've got. I have had some trouble with labeling in the past. So this year I did a new method where I put letters on one side and numbers on another side, and then on a separate piece of paper I wrote down everything that I've had, because I've done it before where I put popsicle sticks with the label, and then the popsicle sticks got wet and the marker ran and I couldn't read what it said anymore. So this is my new approach to labeling my seedlings, and hopefully it works out and I don't get any of them mixed up. So before I go, I will just leave a minute to see if anybody has any questions about starting their seeds here in Reno. Okay, Kelly says, do you have to transfer herbs outside, or can you completely grow them indoors? Yeah, I have had some herbs in my window box that I brought in after last summer and wanted to keep them alive throughout the winter. I will say they haven't experienced a ton of growth during the winter. I think mostly because of the lack of long daylight hours, but you can definitely keep your herbs inside all year round. Like I said, you'll just want to find that south facing window to make sure you can give them optimal light, and be careful as well if you are putting them in a window that you're backing them away a little bit, or putting in some kind of protective measure to make sure that the hot window glass doesn't totally fry your herbs. But yeah, you can definitely grow them inside, and I think it's great, especially in the winter months, to be able to still enjoy some fresh herbs. Is mid-June the best planting time? Yeah, so in Reno, they have the saying that when the snow melts off of pea vine, but there are certain years that you wouldn't be able to grow anything because we have a heavy snow year. So it really kind of depends. I know that a lot of people, depending on where they're at, are in kind of a microclimate, and they could put theirs outside even sooner. I would say that mid-June is ideal, because after that point you're not likely to have another frost that will kill off all of your plants. But if you are eager to get a head start on your growing season, you can definitely plant them out earlier, maybe in May. But just keep an eye on the weather, and if you see that one night we're going to get freezing weather, cover them up with blankets. I've also seen there are like these plastic things that you can fill with hot water and put around your plants to keep them warm. So if you're going to plant before mid-June, definitely make sure that you're paying attention if it's going to freeze, and if it is going to freeze, that you do something to protect those young plants. How long is the growing season? I cannot speak for how long it is in Ely. We do have a pretty short growing season. So our average last frost is about June 15th, and then the first frost I think usually comes in late October. So that isn't a ton of time. So that is why it's helpful to get your seeds started ahead of time, because if you were to plant tomato seeds in the ground after the last frost, you're probably not going to be getting your tomato fruiting before the first frost of the fall. But like I said, with putting protections around your young plants. If you're planting them out earlier in the summer, you can do the same thing in the fall to really extend your season. Or you could also grow in containers, and then when the weather starts to get cooler at night, you could bring them in just as at night so that the frost doesn't kill them. Or you can use things like row covers and blankets to try to extend your season. So that would be for summer plants. And then there are also a lot of things that you can grow almost year-round, cool weather loving crops. So that's a little tricky because once it starts to get hot, they're not going to be happy. But things like spinach and carrots and leafy greens and broccoli, you can grow those in the spring and in the fall, and they're not going to be killed by the frost. So like at the Urban Roots Teaching Farm, we've had stuff growing all winter long, and that's been really nice. But I will say we're very lucky because we have the hoop houses there. So that definitely increases our ability to grow things. But there are definitely a lot of DIY solutions that you can use at home to extend your growing season. Okay, I think that is all the questions that you guys have for me. Thank you so much for joining along. If any of you are at home with kids, we are selling our family engagement kits. You can check out other resources we have, just different ways to keep entertained or different things that you can do in your garden if you want to visit our Urban Roots website at urgc.org. All right, that is all I have. Thank you so much.